All right, let's get right into it. We're going to break down a moment that truly shook America to its very core: the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk. This wasn't just a crime, it became a flashpoint for a nation that was already simmering. The reaction was immediate, and it came from the absolute top. This post from former President Trump just hours after Kirk's death. Wow, it didn't just mourn, it drew a battle line. It framed the assassination in these stark, confrontational terms and really set the stage for the firestorm that was about to erupt. To really get the chaos that followed, we have to start with the facts. The timeline of that day is, well, it's chillingly simple. At noon, Kirk is up on stage. Just 5 minutes later, a single shot. By mid-afternoon, he's pronounced dead. Now, the shooter, Tyler James Robinson, was caught 2 days later. But honestly, by then, the story had already spun way beyond the facts of the crime itself. So you gotta ask, why? Why did one man's death trigger such a massive nationwide response? Well, it really boils down to 3 things: the man himself, the specific moment in time, and the state of the country. So first, who exactly was Charlie Kirk? At just 31 years old, he was the face of a whole new generation of conservatism. He literally co-founded Turning Point USA from a basement and built it into this multi-million-dollar empire, mobilizing young people everywhere. To his millions of followers, he was an absolute hero. To his critics, they called him a grifter peddling hate. He was a polarizing figure, to say the least. And this is absolutely crucial. Kirk's assassination didn't happen in a vacuum. The first half of 2025 had already seen 520 domestic terror plots. I mean, the country was already a powder keg. This event, this was the match. In the immediate aftermath, something incredible happened. Kirk's death was transformed. Let's look at how the political right didn't just mourn a leader. No, they canonized a martyr, turning a horrific tragedy into an unbelievably powerful symbol. The effect on his organization, TPUSA, was nothing short of explosive. Just look at these numbers. In the first 48 hours, they got 32,000 new chapter requests. His podcast was immediately taken over by a sitting U.S. senator. His death became what the source material calls rocket fuel for the entire movement. And the narrative quickly took on this religious dimension. Across the country, evangelical pastors started comparing Kirk to Saint Stephen, the first Christian martyr, who was stoned for his beliefs. So his death wasn't just political anymore. It was being framed as a kind of holy sacrifice. And this idea of sainthood, it was everywhere you looked. A cardinal called him St. Paul Reborn. The former president promised him the Medal of Freedom. Congress was pushing for a gold medal. Even his widow, Erica Kirk, declares the whole thing a form of spiritual warfare. The message was unified, it was clear, and it was incredibly powerful. But for every single person who saw a martyr, someone else saw the violent end of a deeply divisive figure. This event didn't unite the country in grief. Not at all. It ripped the existing fractures wide open, creating what can only be described as an inferno of division. This slide just captures the two opposing realities perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you have a warrior stoned for speaking truth. On the other, a grifter peddling hate. One side blamed leftist venom. The other blamed MAGA rage. Some people were even celebrating his death, posting things like good riddance. It was as if 2 completely different countries were reacting to 2 different events. Then, a YouGov poll came out right after the shooting, and it revealed something deeply disturbing. When they asked people if political violence is sometimes justified, 7% of conservatives said yes, but a striking 18% of liberals also said yes. This wasn't some fringe belief anymore. It was a measurable sentiment in a dangerously fractured nation. And these shockwaves weren't just contained within U.S. borders. America's allies, especially over in Asia, were watching all this internal chaos with growing alarm. Here's something a lot of people don't know. Just days before he was killed, Kirk was on his first big tour of Asia. He was in Seoul and Tokyo, building bridges with a new generation of right-leaning youth, trying to get them to join a global fight against what he called globalism. From their perspective, this wasn't just another tragic American headline. No way. As this quote from a major South Korean newspaper shows, it was a terrifying signal of instability. Their thinking was, if America is so consumed by its own internal conflicts, if D.C. burns, what happens to our security alliances? What happens to our trade deals? For allies like Japan and South Korea, this raised urgent, almost existential questions. Could they still rely on a fractured America for their security? Would all this chaos just embolden rivals like China and North Korea? Suddenly, the stability of the entire region felt uncertain. So, all of this brings us to the fractured horizon. After the shock, after the martyrdom, after the global anxiety, what does it all mean for the future of a nation that is so clearly standing at a dangerous crossroads? Ultimately, if there's one core takeaway from all this, it's this. Political violence doesn't solve problems. It doesn't create winners. It simply creates a vacuum, a dangerous, unpredictable emptiness right where civility and dialogue used to be. And that leaves us with this final, vital question. When a nation is faced with a void like that, what comes next? Is it even possible to fill that emptiness with dialogue and maybe reconciliation? Or does the void just get deeper, leading only to a final catastrophic rupture? The answer, well, it remains unwritten.